Michael-Bridge Dickson, welcome to Christiana's Psychic Cafe. How are you?
Anna, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Terrific, and I thank you so much for being here. Of course, we're here today with a very specific purpose. We are going to talk about Orbifold Tarot.
Woohoo!
Yay! But let's start with this question. What's an Orbifold?
What the heck is an orbifold? Oi. Okay. It's this really, really freaky, weird, cool geometry thing. Probably the simplest explanation is that most of us are familiar with as kids. One type of orbifold is a Mobius strip. So that's when you take a piece of paper and you put a half twist in it, and then you join the two ends, and then we do fun games like cutting them, and then when you cut it, it just becomes a bigger loop. If you put two twists in and then you cut it in half, it becomes two loops interlinked and all this kind of stuff. But with the half twist Mobius strip, if you don't cut it and you draw a line on one side and you go all the way around, all the way around, all the way all around until you finally meet up with your start, guess what? The line is drawn on both sides. Now, that's kind of a two-dimensional orbifold. If you can imagine that if you took that same Mobius strip and you took the top and bottom edges, which they're actually neither a top or a bottom because of the half twist, right? But if you took the top and bottom edges and linked those as well, and also put a half twist in them, then you could actually wind up you would wind up sort of this weird sphere-ish thing that you could walk along, and you could walk along the inside of it, and then walk along the outside of it without having to do any magical stuff because of the structure. The structure of it is magical. You don't have to be magical. So I'm not trying to say that my tarot deck is magical and that you don't have to be magical. You do. I think actually with tarot, the opposite is true. The deck is not magical. You are. But with that brain bend, hopefully you can get into that, you can access that aspect of magic. So, yeah.
So and I hate to even ask this question, and I'm showing how ignorant I am about geometry and all and physics and all of that, but I could just see like a very young Michael in school being really happy to cut up the Mobius strips. I could just see that image.
I was totally happy to do that.
Yeah, I bet you were.
I was actually really bored in most math classes. I fell asleep in math class a lot. And I was really bored in math class, and I didn't get algebra really at all. But I love physics. I love quantum physics. Like basically all I watch on TV are TV sitcoms, right? And physics shows about the universe and quantum physics and atoms and black holes and all that shit. It's like, I love it.
Forgive my ignorance, but the word orbifold, is it a word or is it a word that you made up?
I did not make it up. No,
it's not make it up.
It's a real thing. I liked the word though, even without necessarily knowing what an actual orbifold is. I liked the idea because I knew that I was basing it on circles, and I like the idea of folding, or rather unfolding, the deck in a reading, and unfolding layers of meaning and layers of interpretation, and unfolding layers of the self in a reading too, right? And then because I was working with circles, I was like, oh, they're orbs. So it's like the folds of an orb, and it's kind of like the deck together is a folded up multi-orb, multi-fold orb, and then as you work with it, as you deal it out and as you draw cards, you're unfolding the orbs the orbs of the deck and the orbs that actually are occurring in the client and the reader, if it's because I mean, I also like to use the deck for personal work and meditative work. So when I'm working with my deck, obviously my only interaction is me and the deck, which really in a lot of ways it's just me. So so I'm unfolding the orbs that are inside.
So let's talk a little bit about where this deck is in terms of production. We're recording this on the 27th day of July, 2015. I should have it up on YouTube today or tomorrow.
Excellent.
So what's important right now, this minute, is that this deck that I'm holding in my hand is a prototype, of which there are only 22 copies in the world. Is that right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
I'm so lucky to have one of them.
Yeah.
And the deck is in funding. So
Yeah.
tell us about the funding campaign and what people need to do to make this deck a reality.
So it's on Indiegogo. We're about the third week in, so there's about 5 weeks left.
Great.
I've given an early bird special, so the first 100 decks that are sold, they are like below cost. The printing method that I'm using is kind of a gloss, a selective high gloss. So there's parts of the card. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can really get it, but maybe you can. I sent Christiana 2 cards, right?
Yeah.
That have the high gloss. So the design in the middle and the title and the number have the high gloss on them, and then the rest of the card is matte. So it gives a tactile, dimensional feel, and it's a really cool look too.
Yeah.
But I think it makes the deck just all the more beautiful than I think it already was.
Yeah.
Sorry to be not modest, but I think it's
No, it's absolutely right.
And but that printing technique is really expensive in small runs.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, those first 100 decks that I'm selling that are at a lower cost, an early bird special, they're basically at cost. Right. For those decks. I'm not making any money, but I want to get it out there, and I want the people who are early on the train to get a deal.
Yes.
So because I hope it's actually going to be fairly successful, because I really believe in it. I didn't think of designing something successful or amazing or cool when I first started it. I really just wanted something that I wanted to work with. But then as it was going, I thought, wow, this is working out. This is really cool. I like this. I think a lot of people will like it too. And as I've been working with it more, I'm actually seeing more applications than what I even originally planned. So it's kind of in a way it's bigger than me, or I hope it is. Mm-hmm. So that's really cool. And so yeah, so people need to go and get their early bird special now. And even if not, even if people can't because of funds or whatever the case is, you guys can really help me out by talking about it, discussing it, asking me questions. I'm on Eclectic, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on all of it, except Pinterest, I think. So you guys can ask me questions about it if you want to know questions, or if you just want to learn more about the deck or the style or whatever, just ask me questions and talk about it and share, and all of that stuff is going to be a huge help for me.
Terrific. So let's talk a little bit about the Orbifold Tarot. I have to say, Michael, that when you reached out to me and asked if I'd be willing to receive a copy of it, of course I was honored because I knew it was just a small number of people that you had chosen. But I was a little concerned because from the pictures I had seen, it is clearly a very different kind of a deck. And, I'm a little bit of a weight girl. You know that. I like pictures of people doing things. And you know, one thing that is completely absent in this deck is pictures of people doing things. But you know, I love it.
That's
And
great.
I think that I think this is an important deck. And I really want to encourage people who look at it first and say, oh, I think I need more stories.
Mm.
Or people who say, you know, there's nothing to work with here. I would say for a couple of reasons, this deck is important. Now, I think a lot of people are just going to grab onto it and say, oh, wow, cool, let's play. You know, the people who are into sacred geometry, the people who I think Marseille readers are going to resonate with this very easily because it is Marseille-like in a way.
In some ways, yes.
But for those of us who tend to be scenic readers, this deck will really help you open up your intuition. And I've had some wonderful experiences reading with it. I've done some professional readings with it. And while I'm really looking forward to the deck that is tactile, because I think that tactile piece is just so cool.
Mm.
What I love about these images is they're very appealing. And there are stories here. If you let yourself, if you get out of the idea that stories are always have to be about people pictured a certain way, you can start to see the stories. And as the story emerges, because you work so much with light and dark, there's colors, there's plenty of colors. It's not boring.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of light and dark.
Yeah.
And in that, I think that the brain and the third eye and all of that really can connect in, and you can start to, you know, I'm going to sound crazy. You can lock me up as a batty old lady, but I swear to goodness, when you work with a deck like this, it opens you up. If you're a person who wants to be able to see visions, who wants to be able to see things, and if you want to use tarot to help you do that, this is a deck that can really help. That's what I think. So I've had some great experiences with it, and I will say this too. If you're a tarot student simply looking to learn the cards, this deck is a great test for you. You know, can you look at the 10 of fire and have a picture in your head of the weight 10 of wands? Yeah. Or some other 10 of wands. And that's a way to read with this deck too, and it's easy enough to do.
Absolutely.
And what's great there is if you work with squeamish clients, you know, there are images in certain decks where clients are going to look and say, oh, that doesn't look so good. But who's going to be squeamish about this?
I know. Look at that 9 of air.
Right.
That 9 of air, there's nothing about that that's threatening or disturbing, you know?
Exactly.
And it still has the same meaning. It's still that 9s are about isolation, air is about thought, and not only is 9 about isolation, but it's almost a 10. It's an abundance of thoughts. If you're isolated and you've got an abundance of thoughts, of course you're going to be kept up all night. Right? And being kept up all night isn't necessarily a bad thing either. The way it's sometimes depicted in scenic decks. But it makes sense that you're going to be a little bit insomniac. I know this well. I've spent many a night, all-nighters working on projects because I've got just too many things in this little head of mine that have to come out, you know? And it's good. I mean, yeah, it would be some ways better for certain parts of me to be asleep in bed, but it's good as long as we know when is it time to follow that abundance of thought and when is it time to lose sleep over stuff. That's a good thing. It's of course it's also going to come up at times when we're losing sleep over things that we shouldn't pay. It's not that we shouldn't pay attention to, but we shouldn't invest our thought energy into, you know. Sometimes we overthink things, and that's moving into the 10 of swords. ten of air, where sometimes we overthink things to death, where it's just like, it's over already. Just drop it.
So, you brought up an interesting point in that, okay, if we look at the Nine of Air, the Nine of Swords, and we think about how it's depicted in Weight and in so many others where it's very dark, it's very gloomy, and clearly we're looking at nightmares or depression or anxiety or sorrow. And your point is good, that sometimes that abundance of thought that creates that is an unhealthy thing, sometimes clinically so, and that's really what's pictured in that Weight image,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have
It
to
could be a wonderful thing. You could write the great American novel in
Absolutely.
that space.
Yeah.
And so in this deck, I think it's really going to be up to the context. It's going to be up to the intuition of the reader to sort of decide where that energy falls. And I think that's going to be very helpful to people.
Absolutely. And it was interesting, you a moment ago, I don't know if they've been shuffled back into the deck, but a moment ago you held up three cards when you were talking about story. The Lovers, the Three of Fire, and I think the Queen of Fire was there. And what's really cool is the way that the colors interplay. Yes. Yes. And so you see how there is a story. That Three of Fire is now the three balls of fire in the Lover's card. And then the three water spheres in the Lover's card, they're condensing kind of into the Queen of Fire. The three has now grown to become the background of the Queen of Fire. And so there's certainly an interplay of elements, and the elements being associated with different aspects of ourselves. So the fire aspect is action and doing things, and action is now in the Lovers merging with feeling, with sensation. And well, that's the Lovers. If anybody asks me what Lovers are, they are action and feeling and sensation. That's the Lovers, right? And love, I mean, love is about sensations and acting together, and it's not just a sexual, torrid affair thing. That's what love is about, is that merging of those aspects of ourselves. But then the story continues as they merge into that Queen of Fire. The Queen of Fire has contained her sensations, her emotions to some degree, but she's on a background of action. She's on a background of fire. So there's a definite story going on there, and in some ways the story can be maybe more applicable across different clients because the people are absent. But the essence of what those people represent is absolutely present.
Absolutely, and this was a good opportunity for people to see that you've used an interesting technique in the deck where your majors are on a black background, your pips are on a white background, and your court cards are on a faded color background according to their suit, but then you also use an elemental color for the court rank. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
So, for instance, here's the Queen of Fire, here's the King of Fire. So that's water of fire and air of fire. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people like to make the knights be air,
I know that. I've gotten that comment a lot. I totally get it. I get it, but I don't get it. Like, I respect that side of things. I have never been able to understand knights as air, because the knights in the scenic decks, the knights are always doing things. And to me, fire is about doing things. It's about action. The kings, they're always sitting on thrones, and they're always thinking about stuff, considering stuff. They're considering what actions they need to take in order to take over the realm, or whatever their thing is, right? And so they're more, to me, they're much more in the thought and air realm. This is an interesting thing too that I kind of wanted to bring up about court ranks. And I know that the tradition is generally to see pages and knights as less mature or younger aspects of the person, younger aspects of the suit, and the queen and king are more mature aspects of the suit. And if I'm going to be reading a scenic deck, I would usually read it that way. And of course, people can read this that way if they want, if that's what they're used to. But I really like the idea that the courts, all 4 court cards, are actually equal rank, but different.
Okay.
But different, right?
Okay.
They're just different aspects of the person. And no one is more mature or less mature. No one is better or worse than the other. But they are certainly different. They have their unique qualities, and they bring different things to the table. I didn't really mean a pun by that, but
No, but it makes sense to see the ranks rather as a hierarchy. You don't see them as a hierarchy.
right.
You see them as just different aspects.
Right. And also a way to kind of think of it is if we put like kind of a row, the row of courts above, say, since we're on fire, say above the 10 of fire, they're all kind of contain the ace of the next suit, whatever the next suit is.
Sure.
So they're the completion of the element that they are residing over. And because they're the completion of that element, they're ready for the next cycle in another element. Unless it's Knight of Fire, then he wants to repeat his fire cycle, right? No problem. That's cool. Sometimes the fire cycle is really fun, so let's go for it again, right? So it's like they're the bridge into the next element cycle. So that's another kind of way to think about it. It's fun. And that actually gets sort of into the Orbifold idea, because Orbifolds are about cycles and going round and round and round. And so when you reach the 10 and you get into your courts, then now you have a new cycle, but within the same structure, right? So in a way, that's an Orbifold. New cycle, same structure.
So I wanted to show, when we look at these images, it's easy to think, well, this is like a not illustrated deck, or it's not, it's not a richly illustrated deck. But I wanted to show some really striking images that I think really speak to their energy, to their archetype in a fabulous way. First of all, Major Arcana 13, Death. I just think that's fabulous. It's deep, it's beautiful, it's a tip of the hat to the Waite Smith in a way, with the flower. Like, that's what I see. I see the Waite Smith flower there from the Death card. But really its own thing. I also love the Hermit. I love
that one too. I mean, I'm a bit of a hermit myself, so I identify with the Hermit anyway. But I love that because he's got earth above and earth below. So it's like he's in his little cave. Mm-hmm. And if you kind of look at the overall visual, the action of the eye as you're looking at that image is going from the border to the center. So it's really a retreat within. And within, in that center, is that light. And the center is the feeling center. It's the water aspect. So the Hermit is retreating into the earth to get in touch with his feelings, his sensations, his emotions, and then from there, he then radiates. And there's the 6-pointed star from his lantern. Mm-hmm. Even the whole shape itself, in a way, kind of looks like his lantern. And I love that card. There's so many things in it that, in a way, just kind of worked out. Like, I would like to say that I'm really that clever. I'm not. I'm not. It just worked out that way. But I love how it worked out.
So, did you do this digitally, or did you do it with pen and paper?
I did it digitally. Yeah. Um, it, it would have been such a pain. It's so easy to draw circles
Yes.
on Photoshop, and then the work in it wound up being in creating the shading and choosing which parts of the overlapped shapes to highlight, which ones to ignore, which ones to include but maybe not highlight. So that decision process um, took some effort. But I was like, why should I put all this effort into using a compass and drawing circles and redrawing circles when I have a computer that can do that?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And this is the world. Now, how many circles are in the world?
21.
21 circles in
21.
the world.
And actually, the easy way to count them is if you go around and you count how many times a single element is repeated. So I'm just on the screen even, I'm seeing that the red is repeated, the fire is repeated.
Right.
Count it 5 times.
Right.
5 times 4 elements, because there's 4.
Mm-hmm.
That makes 20 circles that make up the outer circle, and then 1 circle for the central circle.
Center. Beautiful. And so is it true then that in death there are 13 circles and in the hermit there are 9 circles? Is that how that goes?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for those of us who are of a magical bent, I think a tarot made out of circles is very appealing. There's a part of me that just really goes back to my misspent youth and just thinks about, oh man, the universe is circles. It's all circles. And I think I had a moment at a Grateful Dead show once where I really came to that very conclusion. Well, actually, once it was oranges. The universe was oranges. But there are circles too.
There are circles too.
Circles too. So there you go. But I think there is something, wherever we come from, whether we come from a very scientific perspective or a very immature perspective, there is something that always comes to the circle or the sphere. For a lot of reasons, we live on one, apparently.
We live on one.
Yeah.
It's actually the most efficient shape. So you can actually, the reason why soap bubbles are spherical, unless they're in contact with other bubbles, but the reason why there's bubbles and why the sun is a sphere and why the earth is a sphere and why nature, raindrops are a sphere, the reason why we continually go back to that shape or we continually see that shape is it's the most efficient. You can actually contain the most material within the sphere with the least amount of surface. That's a mathematical thing that I don't understand the math behind it. I don't care about the math behind it, but I know I care about the result, and that's the result. And so we keep coming back to that. And I'm really also interested in crystal spheres from the idea that they absorb from all directions and they radiate from all directions into all directions. And the same idea that they can contain the most within the least amount of surface area. So I have this small, which really means pretty large, collection of crystal spheres that I love them. There's something about the shape that really does something for me. And I like my other crystals, my naturally formed crystals, and my other shapes. Crystal skulls, I have a couple of too, and I love those too. They're really interesting to me too, but for a different reason. And so that shape just keeps coming back and coming back. And even in our cells, the basic shape of our cells, some cells are flatter, they're more disc or torus shaped. But the basic shape of our cells is at least circular, if not spherical. And so right down to the smallest level, we see spheres and circles, and then it goes way out into the largest aspect. We see spheres again. So it's so basic, but it's so profound too. It's because it's everything.
We in ceremony we start out by chanting, "We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending." You know, there's a lot there. So I wanted to share a couple of stories with you since you sent me this beautiful prototype deck.
Yay!
I have trotted it out into public a few times.
Yay! I can't wait to hear how it's going for you.
Well,
This is the important part for me. All the design stuff, all the theoretical stuff is cool, but what I really, really want for you and for people who use it is that it's useful for you. It's not just a deck that you go and you look at and you go, oh, that's pretty, and then it goes on the shelf, right?
for
I want
me,
it to be used.
it's a very readable deck. It really is, and that seems surprising given the nature of the illustrations, but it's very, very readable, very comfortable for clients. And I've taken it to some groups. I do presentations at my local libraries where I show them different cards. We talk about the history of tarot and the uses of tarot and all of that. So I pass around different decks, everything from, Visconti Sforza Repro,
Right?
way up to one of the newest tarot decks you will ever see.
Woo-hoo!
Here,
This one.
this one. And, you'd be surprised at the number of very knowledgeable people that show up at these events. And these aren't people that we know online in our tarot groups. There
Yes.
are tarot people everywhere.
Yeah.
And those tarot people, by and large, are greeting this very favorably.
Excellent. That's great
Um,
to hear.
the one thing, as I said before, that I'll hear from a couple of people, and we expected this, I really like a deck with pictures.
Hmm.
And
That's
this is
fine.
not that. That's fine. That's fine. But for people who are, sort of willing to be open to how this might work, there's a great deal of excitement about it. And it sparked a lot of conversation in one library group where we'd been speaking a lot about the minor arcana and how the minor arcana really, it's just numbers and elements.
Hmm.
If you put number plus element together, you get card meaning.
Hmm.
And looking at it from this perspective, it was very easy for them to grasp that. So I
Yes.
think for some people, this deck will be a very good learning tool or teaching tool, even if it may not be a number one go-to reading deck. And I think for a lot of people, it will be a great reading deck.
Yeah.
Now, I did want to ask, and I found one. Oh, no, I haven't found the other yet, but I'm still looking. There are two extra cards in this deck.
Yes.
And, people who are subscribers to this YouTube channel, and I thank you so much for being so, know that I do not approve. Not approve of extra cards. I
Not approved.
not approve. However, I also, above all, recognize the artist's ability to make their choice, and I honor that. And it happened with Crystal Visions Tarot, which is really one of my favorite new workhorse tarots in my career. That has an unknown card.
Okay.
And in the review, I gave it a great review, but I ranted for a while about why an unknown card is completely freaking unnecessary.
Right.
But I recognize I could just remove that card from the deck, put it in the box, never see it again. The deck would function without it, but I never do. I leave that freaking card in there, and when it comes up in poignant and true ways.
Right.
So I imagine that your two unnecessary extra cards will also do the same. So that being the case, and I can show folks the void, and there's also, it came up just as I was looking for it. Very good.
See?
Manifestation. See, there you go. The void and manifestation. So while thematically it feels like it makes sense when we talk about the circles that create the universe, what do they mean when they come up in a reading?
What do they mean when they come up in a reading?
Yes.
They are, well, let me first, before I go into what they mean when they come up in a reading, is reiterate that you're absolutely right. People have the choice to remove those cards. And as an artist, I I do not want anyone to feel obliged that they have to read with those cards just because I put them in. Try it with those two cards. If it works for you, great. If you already are on board with those cards, great. Put them in, use them. If you're unsure, if you think it's going to throw your readings off, if you're totally against them, I can't have any more than 78 cards. But I really don't care. I would rather you use the deck without those two cards than not use it at all,
Sure.
right?
Right.
I would suggest, though, that even if you do pull those cards out, to not include in your drawing, they are really great focus tools for pre or post reading. So one way that you could use them is to focus on the void before a reading, because before the reading you kind of want to be a little bit empty, a little bit of a blank space to be able to receive whatever is there for you, and open to looking at those perspectives. At the end, especially if you're the kind of reader who gives your client tools to go forward with your reading, then give the client, or you can meditate it on it yourself as well, but give the client the manifestation card to meditate on as well, so that they can set that intention to then take your advice and take their own advice, because hopefully we've awakened their own interior advice as well, to take that and move it forward into the world. So those are two maybe non-traditional ways to use those cards that don't disturb the 78 card pack.
I like it.
Now, if you do include them in the deck and you do use them, then they can also be used kind of as wild cards. The two of them, I see the void as the underlying consciousness of everything. So totally unmanifest consciousness, totally impersonal consciousness, but that consciousness that underlies everything. So it's a meaning when it comes out, and it's always in context too. We never really know unless it's in context. But a meaning could be that there are factors, there's an underlying ground of factors that are at play here, or that you can become aware of. There was a third meaning that was in my head, and then while I was talking, it left my head, like the void. But so in some ways, it's open to interpretation, but the difference between the void and manifestation is the void is unmanifest. It's potential. So let's say it came up in a future position for someone, especially let's get creative and say that it came up in the future position after 10 of air and the tower or something like that, right? It represents, I hate to say new beginning because it's so cliche.
But no, that makes sense. That's where I was going to go with it. Oh, it's a new beginning.
It represents a beginning but it's a beginning that's so even more fundamental than any of the aces or the fool, because it's actually very impersonal. Everything is really afresh. Instead of you as an individual making a new beginning, the whole situation, the whole ground of that situation is undergoing a new beginning. So that's one way. And actually, I actually invite people to make their own interpretation for those cards. But I will say my interpretation of it is unmanifest. It's the potentiality of things before anyone has put their take on it, before it has started to manifest into something, before all of that. And it's kind of like, in a way, that state in sleep before we start dreaming in the morning, before we wake up. So it's that state where there's consciousness, there's potentiality, but as soon as we start actually dreaming, we're already starting to put our own thing on it.
Right.
Still, it's passive, but it's, you know what I mean? And so that voidness is before that, before we get all mucky in it. Manifestation is kind of like the flip side of the void card. So it's almost like if you put the two back to back, and one side of the card is the void, and then the other side of the card is manifestation. They're that interplay between pure consciousness and then that consciousness moving into stuff. But again, it's impersonal. So there's a relationship between the void and the fool, but the fool is an individuated consciousness. There's some will there, and it's a clean slate, but it's a clean slate of a person, of some manifest thing that is starting a new cycle. That one is really new beginnings, because it's part of a cycle in that sense. And then manifestation and the magician, also very closely related. The magician, to me, is more personal will. So we take the fool, and the fool is consciously activating their will for manifestation into the magician. Whereas the manifestation card, it's not that personal will. It's outside influences. So you can look at that relationship that way. So you can kind of, in a way, you can read the void and manifestation like the fool and the magician, but the fool and the magician are kind of interior forces, the will and personal forces, whereas the void and manifestation are outside of you, outside of your control too. In the similar sense that the tower is often outside of your control and you just have to deal with it. But the tower has that destructive sense, destructive nature, and sometimes we have to destroy things. It's good. I think it's a great card, but manifestation is more the creative. It's like the fool is kind of like the fool being born into the world. Manifestation is kind of like the world that you're born into, in a way. But these interpretations, they're fluid. So I like that. I like fluidity.
You know where I was going with it? And this is like just a whole other thing, but when you were speaking about it, I was thinking, in a way, for me, these two cards, the void and manifestation, could express kind of my two ends of working with tarot, divination and magic.
Right.
Now that when we go to the void, we are seeking answers.
Right.
And when we go to manifestation, we're using the energies to create something.
For sure.
So that sort of came to me too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just had, in the time we have, I just have a couple of questions about you. In that, I mean, I'm trying. We became friends through, the great machine of the internet that connects tarot people. And I recognize that there are so many tarot people that are not part of that machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those of us that are, we find each other on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all of that. And then eventually maybe we'll meet at a tarot con, like in October this year in Florida.
Yeah.
But where did you come from? Tell us about your life in tarot or your life in general, or, just the snapshot of how you came to create this deck.
I came from the void. No, I live in Montreal. My day job is as a yoga teacher, and the tarot was kind of in the background for me for a long time, but I didn't really latch onto it. It didn't really grab me, and I reached a point where I've been teaching yoga for a dozen years. I've been training other teachers. I continually continue my education. I've never stopped from day one. I've never stopped learning about the body and applications of yoga and Ayurveda and yoga philosophy and blah blah blah. All great stuff. I make it sound horrible. It's all amazing stuff. But I read and studied and practiced so much stuff, and a lot of it very theoretical, that my initial interest in tarot, funnily enough, was in scenic decks, that I saw them kind of as a book without words,
Sure.
where I could recognize all of this stuff that I've learned about people and personalities and interactions and the interior world and the exterior world and all of this stuff that I had learned and experienced through yoga. I actually, something flipped in me that went, hey, silly, there's been this book without pictures here, book without words, with just pictures all along here, and you've been ignoring it. Why don't you pick up this book with pictures? And I'm very visual, actually. I love pictures, but most of what I read is totally factual, non-fiction. Like, I'll take a reference book that you're meant to just kind of flip back and forth through, and I'll read it cover to cover. It's crazy. Like, it's stupid. It's not stupid, but it's crazy, you know? But I enjoy it, so why not? It's not so crazy. But I was definitely ready for a break from that wordy, intellectualized stuff. I still wanted to learn more. I still wanted to continue my education, but I wanted to do so in a more abstract way, where I could read something else like pictures, which are not so abstract, but the learning that goes on with pictures is abstract.
Oh,
right?
yes,
It's not the same
absolutely.
as reading a book. So that was kind of the switch that flipped for me in tarot, and then I just kept recognizing all this other stuff that I knew, but then it unfolded new layers to that I never would have encountered if I had not turned to tarot. So I really kind of fell in love with it, and then the idea came after a little while, because I'd been reading, and my reading style just kind of turned into, what's the element, what's the number, pare it down, and I thought, well, it's actually a lot of work. As beautiful as all these pictures are, and I love my scenic decks too. Like, I'm with you on that. I'm totally in love with my scenic decks. But it's actually a lot of work to take a picture, reduce it to those element and number aspects, and then rebuild it from the number and element. And then I kind of felt in a way like I was deviating too far from what the picture was saying. So I thought, no, I really want a deck that is just number and picture, so that when I'm in the mood for that, which is often, I can start there, and I don't have to do the first step of deconstructing, because it's already deconstructed for me. Or deconstructed is maybe the wrong word.
Yeah, it works. It works.
Reduced to its
Mhm.
elements, reduced to its core.
Well, I appreciate that if you're looking, because each interpretation is going to be a little different. You'll never say the same thing about the same card twice exactly.
Right.
And you're right, sometimes you do stray far from what the picture seems to say, although be very much in the realm of what is appropriate,
Absolutely.
classically, given all the different traditions, given, that paring down to number and element. And when you're doing this, you don't have a client saying, well, that's not what it looks like.
Right, exactly. And it's funny, because I also was reading mostly with the Wild Unknown. I love that deck.
Well, and that's a very abstract deck, too. It speaks so well, though. I think that's a fabulous deck.
That's beautiful. So I was reading mostly with that, but I was also finding that in readings, a card would come up and I would go, well, this card, is showing this, but in the Rider-Waite, it shows this. And so I would end up actually giving the Rider-Waite interpretation of the card. Or in this other deck that I also use and am familiar with, it shows this. And so give that other.
This is a good method. I call it the deck in your head.
Exactly.
I tell my students you should have 5 illustrations for each card in your head.
Exactly.
No matter what deck you're looking at, you pull on all of that because it's all important.
It's all important.
Yeah.
They're all just different shades.
Yes.
It's still 5 of Cups. It's still a 5 of Cups. But they're different shades of the 5 of Cups that are some shades are important now, and a different shade is important another time. And so that what I find is that's easier with this.
Yes.
Because you can access that library in your head of all the decks that you know, all the decks that you have, all the decks that you love. You can access that whole library here a little bit more easily. So that's fun too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation, and I want to thank you for creating this fabulous deck. I think that, every tarot deck is important. I've never met a deck I didn't like in some way. I mean, I even have the Miss Cleo tarot, and I think it has its place in the world. I really do.
Right.
But I really like to see a deck that is innovative, that can teach, that can give us a new way of looking at things, but still honors the traditions that create what tarot is. And I think you've really done that with this deck, and I think other people will think so too. So, if you're watching this video, when does funding end?
I think it's September 1st.
Okay. So, if it's not September yet, follow the links and go fund this deck. If it's after September, follow the links and find out how to get your own copy.
Yes.
Michael-Bridge Dickson, I want to thank you so much for being here on Christiana Psychic Cafe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a lovely conversation.